So
Great.
welcome everybody to this exciting seminar or workshop, if you will, on careers and student programs with the U.S. State Department. We are delighted to have Matt Kawecki. Is that correct, Matt?
It's more correct than what I say, actually. Since my great grandparents came to Ellis Island, we say Kawecki, but yeah.
Kawecki. All right. So welcome, Matt, and he's a resident of Thousand Oaks. So he's a little more legit than I am. I don't live in Thousand Oaks, so he's closer to Galveston than I am. So Matt, the floor is yours. We're recording this and present for about 20-25 minutes, and then we can have some time for Q&A.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Khan. My name's Matt Kawecki. I've been a Foreign Service Officer or U.S. diplomat with the U.S. Department of State since 2010, so about 10 and a half years. Today, the topic of the presentation is going to be careers and student programs at the U.S. Department of State. I'll walk through a PowerPoint presentation that has a lot of different, career and student opportunities that you could take advantage of. But I'll kick things off with a brief introduction of myself. I'm a Foreign Service Officer Generalist, which is what I'll explain early in the presentation. I am a political career coned officer. And I have worked as a political officer, an economic officer, and a consular officer overseas in Beijing, China, Cairo, Egypt, Muscat, Oman, and Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Most recently, I've been working remotely from Thousand Oaks for the IT or Information Resources Management Bureau of the State Department in our Office of E-Diplomacy. I'm sort of a diplomat between the diplomats and our IT people in the State Department. So making sure that our IT bureau is furnishing diplomats overseas with the tech tools they need and helping diplomats overseas adopt new tech tools. There are a lot of things happening at once with cloud-based storage, communication, and collaboration. And during the COVID-19 period, we moved to over 88% telework, and we're still there, as you can see. I'm in an apartment now, but yeah, I'll kick things off. That's enough about me. So careers and programs at the U.S. Department of State. I'll start by talking about what it means to be a Foreign Service Officer. A Foreign Service Officer is a U.S. diplomat. You can see, that U.S. diplomats are entrusted with promoting peace, supporting prosperity, and protecting American citizens abroad while advancing interests. This is a standard presentation. I would also say American values and interests. It's not just one or the other. You can choose anyone who wants to become a Foreign Service Officer, visit this URL or just go to careers.state.gov and navigate to the Foreign Service Officer section, and you'll see an explanation for the process. Every year, if you want to become a Foreign Service Officer, you just need to be a U.S. citizen who I don't give these presentations as a standard. I don't remember what the cutoff age is. I think you need to be between 20 and 59, but the website will have better information. Those are the only requirements. You're a U.S. citizen between, I believe, 20 and 59, and then you can take the Foreign Service Officer test. There's a written test. If you pass that written test, there are other stages in the process that eventually lead to an oral assessment in Washington, D.C., though actually right now, I believe it's done remotely, just for public health reasons. But there are 5 career tracks. I'll talk about those briefly. Consular officers, these are diplomats who adjudicate immigrant visas, non-immigrant visas overseas, and also support American citizens overseas. So it kind of like being a social worker for Americans who are overseas who may run into judicial issues or really anything. If someone's going to the U.S. Embassy for help, they're going to talk with a consular officer. Everyone who joins the Foreign Service for now needs to do at least one consular tour in their first 5 years. I did a consular tour in Egypt where I worked in American Citizen Services during 2013 to 14. So there's a lot happening then, and also adjudicated some non-immigrant visas at the time, which is if someone wants to visit the United States but not immigrate for business purpose, for really all kinds of purposes according to U.S. immigration law. Economic officers report on economic issues and analyze economic issues happening overseas, and also sometimes will build bridges between U.S. companies and either foreign companies or governments. Management officers, they run the embassies and consulates and make sure things are working, and that is top to bottom. That the motor pool and all the transportation is working, that you are construct new buildings, things like that. Political officers do the same thing as economic officers, but in the political sphere. So can focus on human rights, can focus on political military relations, a wide range of things in the political sphere, election monitoring. Public diplomacy officers focus on two things. The information officers in public diplomacy, they are press officers, and they interact with international press and are the U.S. government's mouthpiece and ears on the press side overseas. And cultural affairs are educational programs and exchanges, as well as cultural exchanges and events that happen overseas. So I'm just throwing a lot of things out there. These are the Foreign Service Officer generalists, and I am a political officer in this. I'm going to go through the rest fairly quickly to leave time, just because there's so many different things. I want to focus mostly on Q&A. Foreign Service Specialists, these are also U.S. diplomats who you apply for a specific job to start with, I believe. There's a whole other process for this. I'm not one. You can look on the careers website, but you start, I think, at a particular position, and then you will rotate to that same type of job at different embassies and consulates. So that runs from office management and administration to actually constructing embassies and consulates, managing the facilities, IT, English language programs in particular, and running our overseas libraries at embassies. And then there are security positions that are entrusted with guarding ambassadors and other diplomats while overseas. And lastly, doctors and registered nurses who are stationed in the embassies to support the Americans who are there and the staff who are there. There's another way you can work overseas in a consular capacity without, if you don't want to go through the whole process of becoming a U.S. diplomat. That's the Consular Fellows Program, and you can, I believe, participate in this for up to 5 years. It is a program that targets hiring people who have desired language skills, the ones listed here: Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, Chinese, and Arabic, because we have a great need for people who speak these languages to do interviews. The State Department provided me with Arabic training for Arabic, and I came in with Mandarin. So I was able, I can get jobs in the Middle East or in China, but there's still a huge demand on the consular side, mostly visa interviews. And you can work in this type of position for several years. I think there's not a formal way right now to bridge from this to become a full-time diplomat, but that may have developed in the last couple of years without me knowing. So there'll be more information on the website in the case of consular fellows. If you want to work in Washington, D.C. primarily, though there are positions out in Los Angeles, for instance, if you want to work in the U.S. for the federal government, for the State Department, you can apply through usajobs.gov for specific civil service positions. Again, most of these for the State Department are in Washington, D.C., but occasionally there are positions like there's an Office of Foreign Missions, which is a liaison office in Los Angeles for the State Department to liaise with the consulates that are based here. And there's an office like this in, I believe, in Houston, in Chicago, in San Francisco. Those types of positions are civil service positions, but the vast majority are in Washington, D.C. And on USA Jobs, you can find these. Another way to enter the State Department is a Pathways internship. If you just Google Pathways State Department, you can see there are some internship opportunities that then roll into permanent positions. And there's a Pathways program for recent graduates as well. U.S. Department of State also has a veterans preference, and I have some of the the facts here on that. When you apply, you indicate you're a veteran, and if you join the State Department, there's an affinity group as well. And we work a lot with the U.S. military on a daily basis when we're overseas. So it's helpful, I think, for us to have people who have that type of service experience as well. And you'll see this helps especially for the civil service. You see in the second bullet point, there are 3 different hiring authorities related to veteran service that can kind of give you on a special track for civil service careers. Another one, if you are an IT specialist, there's the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. Information on that here, and you can also go to faitfellowship.org. I can answer more questions about this in Q&A if people have them. There are several graduate fellowship programs. One is named after Charles B. Rangel, the International Affairs Program. Information, again, on this slide and on the website listed at the bottom of the slide. Happy to answer questions about that, though I don't have too much. I don't have any information that would not be on the website about the Rangel Fellowship. Tom, is a similar type of program is the Pickering Fellowship, where can fund graduate school, and then you have an opportunity to join the State Department permanently after that. Though not a guarantee, but a lot of people do make that jump smoothly. And there are other fellowships as well. The Presidential Management Fellowship. This is a gateway into the civil service. Veterans Innovation Partnership Fellowship. Another opportunity for veterans. Right now, if you or someone you know is interested, well, I shouldn't say right now, but next summer, 2021, if you're interested in applying for a virtual or long distance internship, we have the Virtual Student Federal Service, which is actually administered by my office, the Office of E-Diplomacy. You don't need a security clearance to work in these positions. They are unpaid. And you can work up to 10 hours a week on various projects. A friend of mine, separate from my State Department experience, a friend of mine I know from when I used to live in China, and then ran into her again in Oman. She was working as a federal, a VSFS intern in Oman while she worked at a law firm there. And she was supporting a State Department post in another country in the MENA, Middle East, North Africa region. So there are a lot of opportunities. If you go to vsfs.state.gov, in the lead up to next July, you would be able to apply and work there from September to May. Then there is the more standard formal internship program. Well, there are 2 of them. This is the Foreign Service Internship Program. This is for undergraduates, though, which has a DC component and a 10 weeks overseas component. Rising sophomores and juniors apply. I'll skip to the more relevant one probably for this audience. There's a student internship program, which sounds like the same thing, but it is different. Undergraduates who are at least sophomores can apply, and graduate students who have not yet graduated can apply. More information if you look at the student internships page on careers.state.gov. There are different seasons. You can work as an intern in the fall, spring, or summer, but typically you need to apply 9 to 10 months ahead on usajobs.gov. So check out that, that job database if you're interested. The reason it's such a long lead up time is because you need security clearance, and so you'll go through that background check. Another scholarship option, the Gilman International Scholarship. This is, again, for undergraduates, so I won't get into it too much, but there are a lot of opportunities along these lines. I mean, more, this is a CAA fellowship is a funded program for for Washington-based interns. And you're housed at George Mason University, and then the Harriman Fellowship is also for undergraduates. I won't belabor that one too much. Critical Language Scholarship. If you look at clscholarship.org, I mean, the application deadline is in 2 weeks. If you're a graduate student, you can do it. I believe for Mandarin, you have to have already had 2 years of Mandarin. For Arabic, you have already had to have 1 year of Arabic. Japanese, I think, already 2 years. But it is, a program that funds language study overseas, and there may be a federal government service component. I am not sure, so I would check it before you apply. That there's not a just that you know all the requirements for when you finish. Bourne fellowship, sorry, the Bourne scholarship and the Bourne fellowship. These deadlines are in February. The scholarship is for undergrads. The fellowship is for graduates, and this also funds study abroad and research. 6 years ago, when a friend of mine was in Oman when my family was there, when she was doing it, there was a federal government service requirement. I don't know if that's changed. The diplomacy seminar, the Cox-State Department diplomacy seminar, is also for undergraduates. I won't get into it in great detail. Another Wrangle program, summer enrichment program for undergraduates. And this is just, sorry, the final slide for Q&A. I will try to do Q&A with this. Actually, this picture of me is from 9 years ago, so I just don't keep a lot of pictures on hand. That's from a trip to coal country in northern China, and a fair. And I think the picture might be in front of a painting of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I cut him out of it. Anyway, that was a trade fair for agricultural. When I was an economic officer doing an ag trade fair, for U.S.-China relations. So there's a lot. It was just like an info dump. So I would like to open the floor up for any questions about. I mean, what I know the most about is the foreign service part of it, but I have worked with and supervised some of the intern programs that were mentioned as well.
Thank you, Matt. That was really, as you said, a lot of information there, but very relevant information. Thank you.
Sure.
I think both the students here and some of the students who will be watching this later would be actually more interested in the foreign services part.
Right. Great.
So if you could talk about so as I understand it, the exam is the first step, correct?
Yes, that's right.
That's right. If as a moderator, if I may use my privilege to ask you, how does one prepare for the exam? Do you have any tips?
Sure. What I usually recommend to people is learn about the job on state.gov and anywhere you can look, and learn about the test. There are practice tests you can find. I suggest taking a practice test, mostly to ensure that you can put forth your best effort within the time limit, particularly, on the writing section. But as soon as you're able to do that, I encourage people not to spend too much time with it, because I think it's sort of hard to really improve your chances on the written test, other than you'll get the greatest yield by making sure you're comfortable with the test. You're not nervous. You're not stressed. You're comfortable with the format, and there are no surprises. But otherwise, there's an essay section. Prepare for that like you would the GRE. But the other sections are hard to prepare for. There's a general knowledge section that is a bit, it's impossible to predict, really. But that's enough preparation, I think, to put you in a good position for the first section.
Joel, Soheri, do you have any questions?
Yeah, hi. I was looking through the website, and it gave like sample questions, and they were very like history based questions. I don't know what your thoughts or recommendations are to study on that.
I recommend to people that because it can be so wide ranging, there will always be U.S. history questions and questions related to like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and subsequent amendments. So a good familiarity with U.S. history and Constitution, Bill of Rights, and later amendments, that is sort of the only sure thing. But you don't need to know as much as like a constitutional lawyer would know or something like that. Okay. So if someone is going to study or just kind of refresh some history, just a general kind of U.S. history primer. Maybe reading one book that you find well reviewed on general U.S. history could be useful, and then maybe an article that has a great sort of rehash of the Constitution's main thrust, the main thrust of it.
And one more, sorry, did you find that it was very competitive to get in, or how did you feel the application process was?
I think it's very competitive. In 2005, I first took the test. I passed the written. I passed the sort of essay section after that, and then I failed the oral test, the oral interview process, which is a half-day thing in Washington. Then I wasn't sure I wanted to do this. I worked in publishing for a while, and then took the test again in 2009. Passed at that time, but barely. And it was during a hiring surge. So I don't want to beat myself up too much, but I think if I had taken, I think now I could get in, but at that time I joined at 28. 27. I turned 28 the first week of my tenure or whatever. But I think if I had not applied during a hiring surge with that level of experience, I wouldn't have made it. But there were folks, there were 3 of my colleagues who joined when I did were 23 at the time, and they've had a great career so far. They're doing very well. And there's some people who joined when they were like, in their low 50s when I started. It just really depends. But I do think it is competitive. I think it's been especially competitive recently because not so recently, but the last 3 to 5 years, because we haven't been hiring that many people. But my understanding is that we did lose a lot of people somewhat recently. So I think probably 6 months ago might have been the best time to apply, but it's still a good time to apply. Yeah.
Joel, do you have anything?
Yes. See if can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I can't see myself, but I will just speak. I was just curious. Did you have an inclination to want to work internationally before? I know you had said you had spoke, Mandarin, and so going in. But did you want to did you see yourself in the very beginning of your career wanting to work overseas in that kind of diplomatic realm?
So I wasn't fully sold on the diplomatic side of it, but I wanted to work internationally, and that's been the case probably for me for the last 18 years of my life. Since I was 20, no, before that, probably since I was 18 or 19, I wanted to work internationally, and I wasn't sure where I would be working. For the first 2 years out of college, I taught history at a college in Northeast China. So I was there in Shenyang, in Northeast. At the time, it was a 4-hour train ride from North Korea, but now it's a lot faster. And then the 4 years after that, I worked for an academic press, making frequent trips to China and as a European company. So I also made a lot of trips to the Netherlands and Germany. So I've only worked internationally for the most part. Now I'm working remotely, but for an international affairs agency, the State Department. So yes, I knew that, but I wasn't sure about diplomacy. And I'm glad I did start with State Department now. And I recommend it to some people. I guess basically if people want to live overseas and work overseas and work in international affairs, I strongly recommend the Foreign Service. I know that maybe is a little simplistic, but that's that's kind of my take.
No, I think that's helpful, Matt. Joel, I hope that answered your question fully.
Yes, thank you. That was helpful. I just was curious if you had started out wanting to go overseas, but I guess that answers my question.
So a Foreign Service officer, generalist, which is when I'm, political officer, economic officer, consular officer, management officer, or a public diplomacy officer, typically spends 2/3 of their career overseas and 1/3 in Washington, D.C. My situation is a little atypical, but we sort of have atypical times, and just for my family, it's best right now to be in Thousand Oaks. But I can't hang out for the next 5-6 years and keep working for state here. I'm probably going to bid next. I mean, I may bid on a position in the Czech Republic, or sorry, Czechia. I guess has a new name. There's like a regional China officer position, so tracking sort of developments related to China and Europe. That's one option. A similar option in Abu Dhabi, looking at it's not like State Department's all about China, but I have Mandarin, so a regional China officer position in Abu Dhabi could be possible, or going to Jordan. There's just a lot of possibilities, and people usually spend 2/3 of their career overseas.
On that note, is there opportunities to transition into different sectors of the federal government? And also just that you were talking about that internship program that you can do online that's just starting up sometime soon. Does that experience typically transition pretty well into other sectors of public administration?
I think it can help. Your second. In regards to your second question, I think doing the virtual student federal service internships can help, and we have them not just for the State Department. My office in the State Department runs that program, but you can do internships in other departments and agencies in the U.S. government. So if you, if you're interested, just VSFS, Virtual Student Federal Service. There are internships, these virtual internships that will be doled out next summer, all throughout the federal government. I recommend if someone wants to work in a particular department or agency, they should try to go for an internship in that department or agency. You can transition to other parts of the federal government, but mostly in Washington, D.C. If someone's interested in like Homeland Security job or an FBI job somewhere else in the U.S., it's not an easy transition from state. And I think the same is true for a lot of it. But if you're kind of in the Washington, D.C. mix, and you're doing a D.C. job with state, and then you end up working a lot with Treasury or Commerce or U.S. Trade Representative, Department of Energy, mostly economic related departments, then you could transition. But otherwise, it's kind of like coming in anew, and then they would just say, oh, you worked for the State Department before. And if your particular experience was what they wanted, then it could help. But I don't think you get sort of a special inside track or anything.
That was a great answer. Thank you.
Sure.
And Matt, in terms of the countries that you've posted, so apart from your language skills, can you make a request based on your preference, like where you want to work?
Yes, there's a whole bidding process. You have the least agency over where you end up in the beginning. Okay. When you first start out, I came in with a group of 94 people, and there were, 94 positions more or less. And you state your preferences and you fill out, a spreadsheet, is a high, medium, low, that kind of thing. But ultimately, there's a central HR is looking and seeing who should go where. Mm-hmm. That's the first tour. Your second tour, you have a little more agency because it's a larger pool of people. It's a lot of people, who are 3 years in, mm-hmm. and then you similarly state preferences. After that, it's like one of the most I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's almost like a very libertarian process within the federal government. Like you go and there's a marketplace for jobs, and then you are lobbying people for jobs. So I guess that part of it is very federal government, but you're lobbying different embassies and consulates for a position, and then that embassy or consulate negotiates with the bureau back in Washington that oversees mm-hmm. them, and then you're also talking to them, and in the end, people kind of end up where the different embassies and consulates want them, but there's no centralized direction. The exception is if you're a consular officer, if you're working in visas or American Citizen Services, your assignments are centrally determined and you give input. But for the most part, you can determine your fate. My read on it, some people feel that they have no agency and they're really frustrated by the process. If you get a sense of how the bidding works, you can really shape where you go. and not in a way that's like under the table or something. It's straight above board. And yeah, but the first 5 years can be, you're a little bit at the mercy of the department. But not as much as if you were, for instance, in the Department of Defense being deployed overseas with the military. Then you have much less decision-making power in a case like that. So State Department, comparatively, you do get a lot of say.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. All right. So Harry unfortunately had to step off for some medical appointment.
Okay.
She apologizes. But yeah, this has been great, Matt. Joel, any other final questions or thoughts? Any comments for Matthew?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, Matt. Yeah, I think this has been great. Again, thank you so much, Matt.
Sure.
Do you have any closing comments or any advice? Is it okay for people to contact you at this email?
Yes, people can contact me at this email, and also, I mean, depending how things, if things become safer with the pandemic in the coming months and next year and a half or so, I will. I do sometimes work out of cafes over by Arbalest and Herbs, which is sort of the neighborhood where I live. And sorry, I don't know how widely this will be disseminated, but I feel safe. And if anyone who listens to this sees me working at a cafe or something, feel free to ask me questions about State.
You're likely to become a local celebrity soon. So. But yeah, thank you, Matt. And at some point, again, in the future, once the campus opens up, we'd love to have you come over in person. I think it'll be great. Yeah. And hopefully we'll have a bigger audience. And I think even this is also great, the fact that we're recording it, we can widely disseminate it. But again, thank you on behalf of the MPA program, the School of Management, and the university, of course. We really appreciate this, and we hope to stay in touch.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Khan. Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
for now. See you.
Bye.
See you, Joel.
Bye.